Gotta take a sip of water. I wouldn't be an American in Paris if I did not have a Starbucks cup for iced drinks, because the paper cups here drive me insane. I haven't filmed in so long. My name's Nadia and I am an American living in France. I've been living here for almost 5 years. It will be 5 years on March 4th, 2025. Essentially why I moved to France was that I did a study abroad exchange during my bachelor's degree. I studied abroad in Paris for about 5 months. Fell in love with it. Fell in love with the country, the city, the culture, the language, the people, and moved back home, finished my last year of university, graduated, moved to New York, got my dream job, and was there for like about 2 years and decided on a whim, you know what? I want to move back. And everyone had told me that it would happen in time with work, with my job. I tried with work to try to move and ask about the opportunities there. And it just seemed like it was going to take years. And I am an impatient person. So I bought a one-way ticket randomly one day back in 2019. And then, yeah, I just quit my job at the time and moved to Paris. I told my parents 2 weeks before I left, which I think gave them a little bit of a heart attack. But all in all, I think everyone kind of saw it coming because I was that girl who went on a study abroad exchange to France, came back and was like, I'm gonna move to France. Well, she did, and she stayed for 5 years. I think that I have enough experience and context to talk about the main things that I've learned since I've moved here. Positive things I've learned, positive aspects about living in Paris, and negative aspects about living in Paris. And I think a lot of the things that I'm gonna mention and talk about are just so specific to Paris, and I hate to generalize all of France, but it's very Parisian perspective. I can make a separate video about my journey in moving to France and like all of the little bits and details because it's, 5 years worth of information. But for now, I want to just focus more so on like the lessons. So let's get into it. First one, honestly, very positive, starting off, something that we do every single day, and it's eating and relationship with food, relationship with meal times. I think more so like the biggest lesson in terms of my relationship with food and meals is truly to sit back and enjoy them and savor them. I think coming from the US, you come from a culture that doesn't have a value necessarily as much for really enjoying on a daily basis. There's just this whole process to the food and when you're supposed to eat. The approach to having a meal, like it starts with apéro and you have little kind of literally appetizers, like to kind of kickstart your appetite, your taste buds, and you have a drink. It doesn't have to be alcoholic, but a lot of times it is. And not everyone does it every single day, but I do think that on the weekends especially, it's just a thing. And it's just kind of like the process of the meal. It's like 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. you have apéro. If you have dinner at that time, it's like you're kind of crazy. You have to have like something to build your appetite. And like if you've had lunch at 1 p.m., by 6 p.m., you're already starting to get a little hungry. But you just come to the table and you come to a meal hungry, like ready to eat. Like you don't spoil that appetite and you appreciate the time that you have with the food that you have, people, the company, and the whole process. And like meals, dinners, they can last like 2 to 3 hours, sometimes longer if you like have an event or something going on. But yeah, there's no rushing through meals and eating at restaurants and all that kind of stuff. You're not rushed. You could stay there for as long as you want. The first lesson is really to appreciate my food and the experience and process of a meal and really value that. And I think that's beautiful. And I think it's something that I will take with me the rest of my life, whether or not I like ever live in France again or wherever I move next, like, yeah, I don't want to ever lose that appreciation and love for meals. A tiny like side lesson to that is you can have dessert every single day. Like, that's a lesson that I've learned. And when I say dessert, I don't mean freaking like massive slice of cake or like a brownie, that kind of stuff. Like, refined sugars and processed foods just in general, like the amount that we consume in the US, it's not good for you, it's not good for anyone. And it's addicting. But like in France, you have dessert after every meal. But what it is like a fruit or a piece of fruit, a yogurt. In France, we have in the grocery stores, there's a whole aisle, and if you visited, you would know, or if you live there, you know, of like these little like mini like petits pots of like little jars and pots of like different desserts, and it's kind of like caramel cream or like kind of like a mousse, and it's like a small portion, but it's sweet, and it's really like a way to round out the meal. Like a little sweet something after every meal is totally okay, as long as it's within reason and like balanced. Also, it taught me to not like crave or almost, what's the word? Like, you know when you can't have something, like when you're a kid and they say, oh, you know, you have your Halloween candy, and your parents tell you, oh, you can't have your Halloween candy because, you know, not good for you. And then you want it all the more, or like cookies, and you want all the more. But like when you have access to desserts constantly and like little sweet things, you kind of are just like, okay, like I'm not having a pain au chocolat every single day or any sort of other viennoiserie. Like, I'm having just fruit, yogurt, and every now and then have like an indulgent sweet treat, and it feels totally normal. It doesn't feel restrictive, and so that's just something that I rewired in my brain, I think, compared to when I was in the US. I think another lesson that I adopted almost through osmosis is really like, don't try too hard. And I know like that's the stereotypical French girl cliche, like don't be too much, like don't try too hard, like effortless, but like with effort. And it's not necessarily that. That is obviously an aspect because it's part of beauty standards here, the way that you do your makeup, your hair, how you dress. Like, it's like, don't do too much. But it's more so just a layer of authenticity and just being completely yourself and just not giving a flying about what other people think. Like, the amount of times I see men and women with hair that looks like they quite literally just got out of bed. And like sometimes you see it and you're like, is that a bird's nest or is that your hair? But then you're also just like, it's their hair. Like, it's just their hair. Like, why do I care? Also, working with the French and having that approach and that attitude towards everything of just like, don't do too much. Like, just be you. Like, when you're meeting someone, when you're interacting with someone, always trying to kind of like show off or like showcase how well you're doing or showcase like how you're important. Almost like validate yourself. But in France, you don't really care. And obviously that's great. It's like very freeing. There's negative aspects to it, which I will get to after I talk about the positive things. But yeah, I think it's just great to like kind of step back and be like, you know what? I'm just gonna be myself and, you know, come to this meeting and just say like, great to meet you, let's get into the topic. Like, that's it. Like, nothing too formal or exaggerated. Or I'm gonna wake up and today I don't really feel like wearing makeup, or I'll just put on like a little blush and lipstick and like no one cares. I also like really just stopped doing my hair as much, which is nice. I also miss doing my hair, but I don't feel like I have to do my hair. I don't feel like I have to wear makeup. I don't feel like I have to like look all glamorous all the time. It's very freeing to actually just exist and not put so much pressure on looking a certain way or appearing a certain way. And I think that's just a great lesson that I've learned from being here. And then I think the last one that I want to touch on is still kind of connected to the food thing, but I have learned a lot about wine since moving here. I went back home for Christmas and I was in one of those massive wine and spirits stores, which almost honestly looks like a warehouse. And they're like, oh, this is like a nice floral deep red blend. And I'm like, what do you mean blend? I don't understand. Where is it from? What's the region that it's from? And what are the flavors in it? What do you taste? And it's just, it's a different approach. But I do feel a little oh yeah, I know a little bit about wine. And when you're here for so long, when you go to a cafe, a bar, when you have the menu and it's wine, they don't list the name. They, of course, they'll put Chateau or Chateau de, I don't know, but it's always the region. And so it's reds, and then it has the by region of wine, and then it puts kind of where it's from, or the name of where it's bottled. And over time, you just really learn what you like, what you don't like, what wine from Bordeaux tastes like, what wine from the south of France tastes like. The approach also to drinking in general is less let's get smashed. And don't get me wrong, the French get smashed. 18 to 22-year-olds here are just wild. You have a glass of wine with dinner, maybe sometimes. I personally barely ever drink anymore. And it's just with age, I also have 2 glasses of wine and I wake up slightly hungover the next day, no joke. The relationship with alcohol is one of it's kind of like food. It's a pleasure and you enjoy it in moderation, and you're not drinking with the objective of getting drunk. You're just drinking for the pleasure of it and trying things. And it's a social activity that you use to socialize and kind of form these relationships and have experiences with people, as opposed to drinking to get blasted. Now we gotta get into the learnings. I wouldn't say lessons, but just learnings about France and the French that you don't really get unless you've been here for a long time. And also, disclaimer, all of these things are personal opinions and experiences. You might disagree, you might agree. Just my opinions, take it, leave it, do whatever you want with it. I would say the first kind of more negative learning, the nice way to say it is that they have main character energy, as my current manager likes to put it. I don't think of it in such a positive light. I would say the average Parisian/French person has almost tunnel vision in viewing life through a lens that makes sense to themselves. What do I mean by that? The way that people approach interactions, their day-to-day life, getting things they want or need, is very self-centric. The French love to protest and they love to complain. They love to complain. They almost love to complain so much that it's as if they love to be miserable. After being here for so long, I initially thought of it as oh, the French are very they're passionate, they're Latin, they have this fire to them, and this attitude. I'm a very multicultural, accepting, curious, open person, and I don't find that the French are that at all. And they're very judgmental. And so when I say they have tunnel vision of seeing things from their perspective, here's a very stupid basic example, and then blow it up. And it can apply to so many different things. Traffic. Paris is a major metropolitan city. There's a lot of traffic, cars, any major city, New York, Chicago, whatever, anywhere, London, you get the picture. But I feel as though the way that they approach traffic and maneuvering, you got pedestrians, you have cyclists, you have scooterists, you have other scooters trottinette, I don't know what this is in English, the scooters, the electric scooters, the Lime scooters, and then you have Vespa looking scooters, and then of course cars and trucks and moving vehicles and all this stuff and buses. And I feel it seems as though like nobody's coordinating or thinking like around themselves. Like the cyclists, they don't give a shit about the rules. They're just gonna bust on through the traffic lights regardless of the pedestrians. The pedestrians, they're not gonna look around because everyone should stop before them. It's like everyone has this mentality of, well, I'm going and everyone needs to watch out. Same with cars. And like, as opposed to thinking like, oh, like maybe I'll just let this person go and then continue afterwards. It's, I need to get where I want to go as quickly as possible, as easily as possible. F everyone else. And that's all that matters. And the amount of fights I have seen, verbal fights, physical fights, it's just like this mentality of like seeing your perspective and seeing your way of things. And as opposed to considering like, let me put myself in the other person's shoes and consider how they're feeling and consider maybe I might not be right. No, the French will not do that. The Parisians will not do that. They will think my way or the highway. Fuck all of you. Fais chier, putain. C'est fini. And over time, it's exhausting. It's like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to debate. It's like it applies to everything in relationship dynamics, work dynamics, friendships. Like there's just like such a lack of empathy and consideration for other people that has driven me insane. And so, yeah, it's just something that I've learned that I don't think that people initially call out. They call it like, people will refer to it as cultural, or people, they're very passionate, debating. They debate just to debate. Like they like to always play devil's advocate. I'm like, no, I think honestly, it's just like a lack of emotional regulation and a lack of self-awareness. And I will die on that hill.
Merci beaucoup. Oui, oui, baguette.
I'm gonna get into the next one immediately. So the French language. The French have just such passion and value on their language. Like they put so much effort into preserving their language, ensuring that if you come here, you must speak a bit of it at least. They make sure that you feel very intensely that you need to learn French. There's laws surrounding how much music can be played in French versus non-French. Movies are, even if they're in English, they're subtitled in French. Like there's really just French everywhere, and that's wonderful. I mean, I'm fluent now. I started learning French in 2016. I moved here in 2020, like I said, and I've worked fully fluently in French for going on 4 years now, like my job 100% French. And you know, it took a long time. I'm very proud of that, and I'm very happy for it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But my attitude now that I am fluent and that I can express myself and say anything I want in any way I want in English and French and Spanish, by the way, it makes me even more angry actually at the attitude that the Parisians and French people have towards people who are not fluent in French. I think people talk about like, oh, it's culture. It's cultural that you you come to France and are expected to speak French, and it's like this. It's part of their pride, and they're proud to be French, and it's part of the culture, and it's part of the country and the history. Blah blah blah. Actually, no. It's just you're gaslit into thinking it's culture, and it's essentially an excuse for people who don't necessarily speak English or don't want to speak in a language other than French, so that they can make you feel inferior. And I think the reason why they want to almost make you feel so bad about not being fluent or just not wanting to speak English is because probably those individuals who do that are not fluent in English, or they feel a bit embarrassed or ashamed that they don't speak better English. And yeah, it's actually astounding and quite frankly embarrassing that the French do not speak better English, because you can still retain and value your language, the language of your country, but that doesn't mean that you should make people who visit feel like shit for not speaking your language. It also doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to improve your English, and that you shouldn't try at least to kind of like come somewhere in the middle and meet and like try to have a conversation. I felt so much pressure, and I felt like I needed to perfect my French to be accepted, and I did that. But looking back, what a horrible reason to like learn something or to learn a language. Like, I was made to feel bad by strangers, past relationships, past boyfriends, for not speaking better French, for not wanting to speak French. And it's like, in certain contexts, I understand where it's really useful and it's nice. But like, don't make me feel bad for not speaking your language. There's a great quote that my boyfriend showed me on Reddit, and he's not French, thank God. It really summarizes like what it's like to be someone who doesn't speak French, or someone who has moved, who has immigrated to France, and who's interacting with French people. And I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes. It goes, I speak French because it's the only language you know. But you speak French because it's the only language that you know. He has been here for 2 years and he's learning the language, and the amount of times where like he'll be in a cafe or like interacting with people, and if they're starting to be rude, and he's like literally in this cafe with his French book trying to learn French, and this person starts speaking to them in French, and then he looks at them and he's like, "Hey, sorry, like, do you speak English?" And then just get pissed off, and they're like, "On est en France, on parle français." And then he like just holds up the book and he's like, "Bruh, shut the f*** up. Like, I am trying. Do you have no shame? Like, are you not embarrassed? I mean, I'm sure you're embarrassed, but like, step down, be humble, and accept that you don't speak good English, and just do your best and be kind." Like, I will not accept this whole like, oh, learning French, or like French is like cultural. No, it's gaslighting actually to treat people like trash in the name of culture. Now I don't have to deal with it anymore. But seeing my boyfriend go through it, it brings up like a whole other layer of anger, and also anger for like past relationships also, for not having more empathy towards me when I was doing my best to learn and to exist and really integrate into the culture here and like learn the language. Now I have a whole new built up anger that accumulates over time, like watching somebody that I love go through such negative experiences simply because the French don't want to speak English, and then they want to make you feel like trash for not speaking French. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of French who speak wonderful English. The youth, like I think people like 30 and below, 35 and below, on average speak pretty good English, and at least they try. If you are one of those people who like to make other people feel bad, or you don't speak any other language other than French, shame on you. If you have the resources, go learn another language and get off your high horse.
C'est pas possible, vous connaissez bien cette phrase, c'est pas possible. Alors ça sera pas possible.
Another thing that's kind of painted over as culture, and that is the complacency here and the lack of proactivity. Administratively, it takes ages for things to happen. Like, I've been in my apartment for 3 months and I'm about to finally get Wi-Fi. That's not normal, by the way, but there was like a whole issue with the fiber cable. 2 different internet providers were basically like fighting it out because the cable belonged to one of them, but I wanted to have the service with the other. No one really does anything to fix it. No one really cares. And it's like, well, one of them doing something proactive to ensure that my situation is fixed basically wins them a customer. It's a sale. I don't really care. People will complain. Oh, like, I wish I had a better job. Oh, when, like, things are so shit here. My situation is so shit. My job is so shit. Like, whatever. Complaining, and then don't do anything about it. If you're unhappy, fix it. Do something. Don't just complain. But people are complacent and lazy. Truly, they are. Like, I was like, no, it's cultural. No, they're just lazy. I would say it's not even like, oh yeah, work-life balance or like life balance and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, no, y'all be lazy. Y'all just lazy. Another way to like, at the gym, gyms here, by the way, suck. They're horrible. The gym equipment sometimes will literally be broken for weeks, if not months. None of them are like, oh yeah, let me just call the handyman, or like, let me get someone to come and fix it. It's like, I think I remember one of the like gyms that I was going to 2 or 3 years ago, there were like 2 or 3 treadmills that were broken that didn't get fixed for almost a month. And then one time, like one more treadmill broke, and at that point it was basically 60 to 70% of all the treadmills in the cardio area were not functioning. And so I went up to the front desk and I was like, yo, when are you guys gonna fix the treadmills? And they're like, oh yeah, like they're just broken, like it doesn't work. I was like, yeah, I know, I come almost every single day and y'all haven't fixed it. Like it's been broken for weeks. I pay a monthly fee to come here. So are you about to like discount me for not having all the equipment available? Because this is unacceptable. They got fixed 2 days later because I said something. I thought everyone complained in France, but you see, people will complain, not when it's like something like, oh, collectively, like this actually could be better in the long term for like everybody. It's more so like when it's an immediate pain in the ass, then they complain. They're like, no, or it's like impacting them, then they complain. But if it's just something that's like not directly, immediately impacting them, ils s'en foutent. That's what they do. I think the last thing I'll talk about is the smoking. I have been in social situations where people I know smoke. People have tried to convince me to smoke, despite me saying like no multiple times. What? The lesson is like, they don't care. They're gonna smoke because they wanna smoke. They don't really care about people around them. But one of the worst experiences in the world is that, you know, we don't get a lot of sun in Paris. In the summer, all of the terraces are open. You go and you sit outside in front of the bar or in the cafe, and you're in the sun, and then you have like these tables and you get your little Aperol spritz, and then someone pulls up and they, you know, get out, go away. Do you not again feel ashamed? I am eating. There are children. If you want to smoke and cause yourself to have cancer, go for it. But do it over there. Do it in your home. Do it in an area where there are not other people who are going to be impacted. Initially, I was like, oh yeah, it's like smoking's like, it's okay. It's like cultural, whatever. Every once in a while. I have never smoked. Just getting that out there. But I really thought that like when you would have conversations with people, they would be like, oh yeah, like I'm so sorry, and like apologetic and like acknowledging that they should probably stop smoking. No. They're just like, oh, well, it's my choice. C'est mon choix. Ça te concerne pas. And it's like, yeah, actually, it does bother me and it does impact me because secondhand smoke does have an impact on your health. You have children. Why are you smoking? Is that not enough of an incentive? If it's not for you, it's for your kids or for other people's kids. And I get it's an addiction, but if you have the resources and you have the support, emotional, financial support, and I think also the government offers support at this point. Smoking is definitely something that is still accepted here. I don't understand why. I thought there would be more acknowledgement and kind of a movement to get rid of it over time, and more kind of like a negative connotation with it and a negative sentiment, but it's not. People just are like, it's part of like, if you smoke, and if you don't, you don't. It's like, no, if you smoke, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. And it's not cultural. And all you're doing is hurting yourself and your health and other people's health. I start to tell people like, excuse me, can you please stop smoking? Like it's really aggravating, or like I'm allergic. Usually people are like taken aback, and I don't understand why. Like when you make a point out of the fact that you are uncomfortable around them smoking, they're kind of like, but if more of us did that all the time, then maybe people would smoke less because they would feel so bad because it's bad. Anyways, so yeah, I think that's like the main, like super high level things that I thought about. I think there's some great like positive stuff in there. There's a lot of negative stuff in there, and I think more than positive, but you know, that's how you know I've truly integrated into this culture, because now, you know, I complain. I'm a French person now. I'm basically French. I really hope you enjoyed, and maybe it's like some thought starters for you and some things to think about and consider. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Let me know. Would love to chat. If anyone's watching, of course. I'm very much looking forward to the next video. It's one of my big things for 2025 is to just like create do not consume unless you're creating. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bisous.
Just be you. Be proud of you, because you can do what we want to do.